Uber and Lyft drivers, what's your most NSFW story? Story 1. I don't drive for either of those companies, but I had a pretty bizarre fare once. I picked up a guy and a girl midday Saturday for a short ride, a couple of kilometers. The girl seemed out of her mind and was wearing somewhat revealing clothing, so it was pretty clear they'd been partying the night before. While driving, I picked up their conversation, which they were not even attempting to hide. It was pretty clear that the guy had a girlfriend who was not the girl in the car, and that he had just hooked up with this girl. They were currently headed to his girlfriend to explain what had happened. To be clear, he was bringing the girl he was unfaithful with along to explain to his girlfriend that he had just did it with her. He tipped well, though. Story 2. I was in Santa Ana, California, looking for a guy I was supposed to pick up. He lived in a large cul-de-sac with a small park in the center. It happened to be later in the evening when I went to pick him up. I go through the cul-de-sac once pretty slowly as I can't find his house. I decided then to do a second round of the cul-de-sac, and when I get a quarter of the way through, two guys emerge from the park, and one of them pulls out his weapon and asks, "What the heck are you doing in my neighborhood?" I decided to act really calm and just let him know that I'm with Uber and was unable to find a passenger who I was looking for. He says, "Oh, you are looking for random name. He's at the top of the cul-de-sac blue house." I thanked him for his help and canceled on my rider. Screw that. Story 3. This one is the reason why I stopped working for Uber. It's about 10:30 p.m. and I get a request and accept it. It's a 20-something-year-old girl just getting off work at a retail clothing store. She needs a ride to her home about 35 minutes outside the city limits. Cool, long ride equals more money. I get her to her house, she gets out, and I drive away. So now I'm about 25 plus miles away from the city, so I don't really expect to get any hits out there. I'm about to head back in when I get another request. This one is another 30 minutes further outside the city limits. Maybe this person wants to go downtown. That's an hour-long ride, which means more money. So I'm down. I start heading their way, and it's a beautiful night, so I cruise the whole way with my windows down. Long, winding, narrow roads, no streetlights for miles. Finally, I come across the property. It's a ranch-style place. So I turn in, still no lights. Pitch black. I drive in for about 2 miles with no signs of a house. I'm doubting my GPS at this point, but oh well, I'm already this far, keep going. Oh cool, a house. No lights on though, so something doesn't seem right. I swing my car around to face the exit, leave my car in drive, and rest my foot on the brake just in case, and waited for a while. Nothing. Let me give the guy a call. So he answers and sounds confused. "Hey, I'm your Uber driver, I'm outside. Take your time, I'm here whenever you're ready." Uber? I didn't request a ride. Well, I'm at such and such address in Texas. Your address and information comes up on my app. Texas? I'm in Indiana. I've never been to Texas. Please don't charge me. And then he hangs up. At that moment, I felt that entire pitch black night get darker. I turned down the radio. My window was still open, so I started listening. You know that sound of a dirt road when someone is walking on it? And how it crunches and you can hear every step? Well, imagine that sound, but there are 2 sets of feet, and they're running, getting louder. I look out my rearview mirror, and the only light is from the red parking lights of my car. 2 men, all black clothes painted red by my brake lights. Sprinting, getting closer, getting louder. I slam on the gas, and my car threw pebbles and rocks at them as I semi-burned out, and I hauled as fast as I could out of that property. Got back on that winding road and followed it all the way to a well-lit gas station, shifted to park, and sat there, stunned. What just happened? I tried following up with Uber and nothing really came of it, and to this day, I've always have to wonder what happened that night. Well, that's pretty terrifying to say the least. I don't know if those people were trying to steal that car, or worse. That was a pretty elaborate fake Uber ride, so I would imagine they had some serious plans to do harm to this driver. Good thing that the driver relied on their gift of fear and got the heck out of there quickly. It's also really stupid that Uber didn't really do anything about it. They should at least notify the police and try to identify the individuals, but I guess that is easier said than done. Story 4. Just this Friday, picked up 4 college-age guys from a bar around 1:15 a.m. who were on their way home and teetering on blackout. It was a surge fare of 1.8 and a ride of about 8 miles of mostly highway. So I was pretty pumped to make an easy $10 to $20 in 15 minutes. We finished the bulk of the ride when the most intoxicated of the group springs to life and says, "Dude, do you want Taco Bell?" I think he mixed a request with a statement that he wanted Taco Bell. I said sure, as I wasn't going to be staying out much later, and thought it was sure to yield a tip in cash. So I take them to a little plaza that contains a gas station, a convenience store, and of course, Taco Bell. This is when the same guy sprung to life once again to say, "No drive-through, let's go in." I told him no, but he said he'd give me $10 if I waited, so I reconsidered. They step out of the car, and this guy huddles his friends for a few seconds before they break off into 3 different directions as the drunkest guy half slumps and leans against my back bumper. One rushes the Taco Bell and returns with 4 $5 boxes, and the other hits the gas station and comes back with White Owl cigarillos. When the final man returns, it's with a roll of paper towels, some sort of rivet things, and sticky tack. The drunk guy then unravels the entire roll and shoves it into one of the barf bags that I keep in my back seat, and they get into the car for the last 3/4 of a mile home. Drunk guy is fiddling with it in the back as I talk with the guys about sports and other banalities until I pull up to the house they live in about 2 minutes later. As I pull in, the drunk guy says, "Done," and then slumped onto his buddy's shoulder. He hands me $10 and grabs the bag containing the paper. He looked me right in the eye, and with an incredibly serious tone, he broke through his intoxication for one sentence and said, "You must always remember to recycle," and then passed out to the point that his friends had to carry him. I then got to see what this blacked out genius was up to, a device for smoking multiple of whatever they were smoking that was so precisely made, like holes were equal distance, lines were clean, etc. They invited me in to test it, but I had to be on my way. As I drove off, I wondered what this person would be like in the light of day. What does a sober version of this stoner engineer do? What else is he capable of? Story 5. Some friends and I Ubered back later that night after a party. Being intoxicated, my friend sitting out next to me started to heave, so I worked my quick thinking and opened the window and pushed him to puke outside, in the freezing February air. He did his duty, and we were all thankful that he decided to puke outside. Eventually, we arrived at my house and got out. I looked on the outside of the car, and the puke had frozen all along the outside of the car by the window. The side of the car was covered in puke. We spent an hour helping the poor Uber driver clean it by throwing hot water from inside the house and someone quickly scrubbing. Story 6. Not an Uber or Lyft driver, but I did drive for a taxi company. I had a fare where 2 drunk people were making out in the back of my cab. This isn't unusual on its own, happens quite often, just gotta stop them before it gets out of hand. Well, one of them decides to stop making out and says to me, "Don't tell anyone, okay?" Curious, I ask why, and he responds, "We're cousins, and we don't want our family to find out." Then they went back to making out again. I didn't once think that they could have possibly been cousins, never saw either person before or after, and could have just kept his mouth shut and I'd never have known. Why would you disclose that information to a stranger? This story doesn't make much sense. If this was true, why in the world would the person reveal that about themselves? It was totally unnecessary to disclose and accomplishes nothing. It's not like the taxi driver would have any idea who to tell this to, and who would actually care anyway. So that's bizarre. Maybe it was a weird fantasy role-playing thing that those two were into, and they were trying to get the driver involved. I don't know, people are weird. Story 7. So my dad is an Uber driver, and he says that girls my age, I'm in my early 20s, will drunkenly try to make him go home with them all the time. One time, they were 3 girls who drunkenly were singing to Taylor Swift, and they made my dad record them singing the song, and then they made him sing some of the lyrics. He showed me the clip of them singing and him singing later. It was hysterical. Then they invited him to go to the next bar with them, but he had to keep working. Also one time, an Uber driver told me a girl tried to drunkenly make him hook up with her at her house, but he said no because he's married. And when he got out of the car, she gave him the middle finger and turned around and lifted up her miniskirt and flashed him. I guess Uber drivers get lots of ladies. Story 8. My 2 stories would have to be a lady who was kind of drunk and kept asking me questions and moaning slightly every now and then, and when she got out of the car, I checked the back seat and there was a Sharpie, a sticky Sharpie that was obviously used for something. The other was 2 strippers that had a long ride and kept daring each other to flash me, give me a back rub, suck my earlobe, and that progressively got to the point where one dared the other to hook up with me when we got to their house. Edit. And yes, I hooked up with the red-headed stripper. I thought it was implied. Sorry for leaving people hanging. Story 9. My cousin was a Grab taxi driver, basically an Asian version of Uber. So in Thailand, we have a TV show called Hormones, which is like Degrassi or Secret Life of an American Teenager, and they had a scene where kids were doing it in the back seat of a taxi. Apparently, these kids wanted to try it out, just like in the show, and started making out and taking off items of clothing. My cousin said he stopped looking once they started taking them off, but he overheard the girl getting frustrated that the guy couldn't get hard, So she put on her clothes and left the car furiously. Then the guy asked him to take him home. Story 10. Not me, but a friend who also drives in my city picked up this drunk girl on her bachelorette at 8 p.m. on a Saturday night. She was going like 4 blocks, but she was so drunk she passed out the second she sat down. She pulls off, and about 30 seconds later, she craps in her sleep. She's wearing very short shorts, so it just kind of falls out both sides. Being that she's passed out, he drives her to her hotel anyway, with the windows down, trying not to vomit. And when he gets there, she kind of wakes up, and in the process of getting out, manages to smear crap on his back seat, on the back of the front seat, on the inside roof, on the outside roof, and on the door. She says, sorry, throws him $20 and disappears. Uber gives him $250 to clean his car, charged to the woman. And the next day, he gets an email from Uber saying she called them all pissed off because why did she have to pay for a soilage charge when she already gave him $20 to get the car clean? This chick is clearly someone who has never had to clean up human crap before. Or I guess any crap would probably do the trick. And once that stuff soaks into the fibers and sinks in, it just becomes 10 times harder to deal with that mess. Maybe to really drive the point home with this woman, she should be forced to see a bunch of pictures of the mess that she created. Maybe once she got her memory back and sees the disaster which came out of her, she might be less likely to play the victim here. Story 11. He is a Lyft driver, and one day he was picking up an OR nurse from work and taking her home. She lived kind of far away, so they needed to take the freeway to get to it. They started shooting the crap, and my brother starts talking about how when he was a baby, he had open heart surgery at the same hospital that she works in. Funny enough, this nurse had been in the OR during many open heart surgeries, so she knows a lot about them. She starts talking about them and eventually goes into pretty graphic detail about how the surgery is done. Now, my brother has this problem where he passes out very easily while discussing or seeing medical procedures. He's done it 3 times before, once where he watched himself get an IV, once from seeing the pin in his toe after he had foot surgery, and once while they were discussing how to put a catheter in during EMT training, because he wanted to be a firefighter. So sure as heck, after a little bit of hearing about the surgery, the nurse notices the car veering off to the left, crossing over a lane. She looks over at my brother and sees him passed out cold behind the wheel. She starts screaming, and the car ends up veering off into a ditch on the side of the freeway. The nurse apparently forgets all of her training and just books it once the car stops. Apparently, the smell coming from the deployed airbags smelled like smoke to her, and she thought the car was going to blow up. My brother and the nurse were both physically fine, but his car was completely totaled. Story 12. I picked up a couple in their 30s on St. Patrick's Day this year at 2 a.m. They wanted to take about a 35-mile drive at 6.3 times surge, so I was about to give the third highest-paying fare I'd ever given. A great way to start the night. They had clearly been drinking like they were 20-something since early in the day. The wife, who's in the front seat, was super apologetic for the first 5 minutes or so, completely embarrassed about their level of intoxication, while the husband in the back was trying to be my new best friend. After 5 minutes or so, though, the Sandman paid them a visit and they both passed out. I drove for the next 20 minutes in relative peace. When we arrived in their driveway, the husband was sound asleep and they had a half-inch of wet snow in their driveway. So I took the wife inside first. While on the way in, she upended her purse in the snow, but I was more focused on getting her inside safely. Once we got in, I helped her to the bathroom and then went to the garage to get a snow shovel. I cleared a 4-foot wide path from the garage to the car so I could get the husband inside, because he's a bigger guy and I wanted to be safe, and then finally got him awake. I gave him my shoulder and got him inside, and he begged me, please, just get me to the recliner, I can't make it to the bed. So that's where we headed. All the while, the wife is throwing up with the force of a small waterfall in the bathroom. So I ran outside and grabbed the contents of her purse, which included her phone, now absolutely soaked at this point, and then I came back inside. She begged me to rice her phone, so I started to dig through her cupboards for a bag and rice. While digging, I came across their meds and pulled some Advil for them. I riced her phone and then gave them both Advil and water and told them to take more in the morning, because they were going to need it. Then I locked the door and showed myself out. Now in the end, I was dropping them off for well over half an hour, but the fare was awesome and the day was my second best day of driving, so it didn't really bug me. The kicker? They left me a 5-star review the next day and quote, pretty okay guy. Best ride ever. I think we can all agree that this driver went above and beyond the call of duty for these two. It was like one kind deed after the other. Considering that all the driver had to do was kick them out of his car and say, see ya, have a good night, This guy deserves all the tips. All of them. If these two did anything less than tip him like 75%, it was a disservice. He also needs to receive some sort of award from Uber or Lyft for this act of kindness. This dude just set the bar very high for the rest of the drivers. In the comments, has anyone had an exceptional driver that made your day? And what did they do? Story 13. Picked up this very tall and somewhat muscular-looking black girl carrying what looks like a tackle box. She was dressed somewhat risque. Gets in the car and I said hello, and she responds with a pretty deep voice. So we started the trip and she was telling me that she was on her way to do makeup for one of her friends and her phone rang. She answered the call and it started off pretty standard. I wasn't really paying attention. Suddenly, I just hear, "Girl, what are you worried about? You have a great-looking lady part." All right. Where's this going? "No, Derek is super sweet. It'll be fun, I promise." "No, girl, he's just gonna come through the doors." "Yes, I'll be there. I'll be outside the doors as one of the topless guards." "Anyway, he's gonna pan through the doors, focus on you in the bed, just start loosening up, nothing you haven't done before. Yes, after a few minutes of doing that, you call for the guards, and I come in and we smash. Yes, I brought the strap on, it's in the makeup box." And that's the story of the person planning their inappropriate film during an Uber ride. Story 14. Not a driver, but a story told to me by a driver after dropping off his previous passengers. This was when I was at university. I couldn't bother waiting for a bus home, so I hired an Uber. Luckily, there was a guy nearby dropping off a guy and a girl. Now I knew them, and I'm still Facebook friends with them. They got out, and I got in. I said hi to them and chatted for a few seconds, and they said they were going to go study for a bit and then go to the library to meet up with her boyfriend. I was so tired, I just told them to have fun, and I'd see them in class the next day. The driver overheard most of this talk and said he was surprised the girl had another boyfriend. I asked why, and he said that she and the guy who was just with her were both being very flirty, touchy, and kissing on the way over. I was gobsmacked a little, saying, "No, that's impossible." I laughed a bit and told him he must have imagined it. He said no, he saw them being very affectionate with each other. Now I'm just sitting back there shocked and not knowing what to say. So then he said, "I'm sorry to tell you this, but your friend might be kind of a player because she's cheating on her boyfriend." Now I'm still trying to process what I've been told. A little while later, he drops me off at home. And before I get out, I tell him, "I'm sorry I seemed a bit shocked, but my friends, the guy and girl you just dropped off at the university, they're brother and sister." He was like, "Screw off, you serious?" Almost as shocked as I was. I wasn't completely sure whether what the driver told me that day was the truth or not. For a while, I convinced myself he was screwing with me and knew that they were brother and sister, but I'd noticed other stuff afterwards that kind of confirmed it. Well, crap. This got awkward and disturbing quickly. No matter how you slice it, it's not a great situation, but hopefully it's at least a stepbrother and stepsister situation. Not that that makes it any better, but maybe it would make it easier for this poor guy to process what he just learned. Who knew that a simple Uber ride could change somebody's life and perspective so quickly and with such swiftness? Just imagine if that Uber driver just never said anything to begin with, and this guy would just be going through his life clueless and innocent.